Hello everyone. Welcome to this episode of SNEED-CAST. I'm your host Alexa, and today our special guest is none other than Meghan Ziemba. She happens to be the creator and co-host of the Mavens of Manufacturing Podcast, as well as the owner of Z Ink Solutions, which happens to be a copywriting and editing service. So, hello, Meghan. So much for joining us today.
Hi, Alexa. Thanks for having me.
Of course. And to start off, if we can talk a little bit about your background. So you got your bachelor's and your master's degree in technical writing from the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee, correct?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting because I was one of those kids that didn't know what I wanted to be when I was growing up. I actually was thinking about either doing a lot of traveling, whether that was through singing or acting. I thought modeling would be really cool, but I had parents that were like, no, you have to go to college because if you don't go to college and have a piece of paper, you're not going to be considered successful. And none of those opportunities will help you make a living. So it was a lot of pressure to go off to college. So when I first entered, I was on academic probation twice and almost failed out. And then I ended up getting pregnant with my daughter and I transferred to the University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee. And that's where I learned about professional and technical writing. So the way that their curriculum was set up at the time that I was going to college, they had several different tracks that you could choose from in English. And I was always into poetry and doing short stories, but that's a very competitive field. And if you're not very good at it, you don't make a lot of money. So I was talking to a former classmate of mine who was also a single mom, and she introduced me to the technical track. And the first class that we had, I had to write instructions for how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And none of us could do it. The teacher went through all of our instruction lists and we didn't get one peanut butter jelly sandwich completed. So it was really fascinating to see and learn how words can be interpreted, especially among different demographics and experiences. And, you know, within engineering and manufacturing, you have to be careful how you represent information because it could be catastrophic. So I was just really fascinated how much people would take things literally depending on how they were written and in the order that they were written. So once I got done with college, I got a job at a trade publication in Madison, Wisconsin. And that really got me hooked because I was able to talk to different engineers and just to hear their stories and how their minds worked and how they were coming up with some of these ideas was really fascinating for me. So I've been involved ever since.
Right. And then, so you mentioned that talking to engineers is what got you interested into the manufacturing space.
Yeah.
Then, so you've been crafting content now for the manufacturing space since 2008, right?
Yeah.
Industry for
Yeah, I tried to leave. So I worked with that trade publication, I want to say for 7 or 8 years. And then I wanted to see if I could apply my skill set somewhere else. And I went into a marketing position for a liberal arts college. And I was responsible for creating or helping create some of the content to really generate enrollment. So just to attract new students who lived all over the world to come in and actually enroll at the college that I was at. And it was just really boring to me. Like, it was very linear. There wasn't a lot of excitement on it. Within engineering, there's different things going on. There's different industries. There's different products being made, and it's fast paced. And I like that. So after I left there, I got different positions at different manufacturing facilities and really helped establish their brand voice and create a storytelling perspective with all of their content. And then I also got involved with trade show organization. And that was a lot of fun because then I got to go to different trade shows and see how engineers worked in the booths and how the salespeople worked in the booths and how they really talked about their products. So it really helped advance my skill set as a writer, listening to those conversations and being able to network at a lot of those trade shows.
And then, if you don't mind me asking, what is it that got you started in Z Ink Solutions? Or what is it that led to the creation of it?
Yeah, so Z Inc. I started about 5 years ago. So at the time I was married and I had two more kids. They're both boys. When I had my daughter, I was doing the single mom thing and I was working full time, going to school full time. So I felt like there was a lot of things that I missed with her growing up. And I didn't want to do the same thing with my boy. So I talked to my former husband at the time and I was like, hey, I think I can get enough clients to do part-time work and have some income coming in. So do you care if I start my own writing business, and this way I'll be able to pick my hours, I can be present more for the kids. And he was on board with it. So I started Z Inc. And then that was kind of funny because around the same time the pandemic hit and he ended up losing his job. So I went back to corporate for a little bit with a photochemical etching company that was in Chicago as their marketing manager, which was really fun because I didn't even know chemical etching was a thing. Like I had no idea that it even existed. So it was interesting to learn about that process. And I didn't go to the office for at least 6 months because I was a COVID hire, but everybody was flocking to LinkedIn and other social media channels to kind of keep their sanity. And I really noticed all these conversations happening on different podcasts, but I didn't see any women being a part of the conversation. So I would reach out and offer some suggestions, and they would never reach out to my suggestions. So I just said, screw it, I'm going to start my own thing. So Z Inc. kind of lost a little bit of its glory, and Mavens kind of took over. And it was something unexpected because I really wasn't trying to start Mavens as a sort of side business or side hustle. I just wanted to do something during the pandemic, and I wanted to bring in more women's voices into the sector because there's a lot of cool ladies out there doing some really amazing things, and I just wanted to give them the spotlight so that they could brag about some of their skill sets and the products and services that they're helping all of us with. So it was just kind of interesting because then Mavens kind of took over Z Inc. and people didn't realize that I was actually a tech writer. So some of those conversations were really funny because they were like, we didn't have any idea that you knew how to write about technical stuff. And I was like, yeah, I've been doing it since 2008, but Mavens just became so powerful. It overshadowed what I was doing with Z Inc.
Right. And then if we can get a little shout out to your co-host, who is the co-host the show with you?
Yeah, so I don't have a co-host. It's just me.
Oh, okay, okay. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. I guess the right way to answer that would be is my guests are actually the co-host. So every woman that comes on, I really want the episode to be about them. So we do like a 15-minute pre-briefing before we go live, and they get to talk about whatever they want, whatever their passion is, whatever projects they're working on, if they're, going to trade shows or conferences. So I guess you could say the guests are the co-hosts of the Mavens.
And then how often do you drop episodes?
They happen every Friday at 11:30 Central Time. Mostly every Friday. There's been some that have been missed because things come up in manufacturing. It can get pretty chaotic. So sometimes we have to reschedule. But January, I was actually had 2 episodes a week for like the first 3 weeks of this year. So, but I'm trying not to do that again because it is a lot to handle. But every Friday at 11:30 Central Time is my consistent schedule.
And then with so many episodes that you have out now, what have been some of your favorite hosts, or not hosts? What have been some of your favorite guests and topics?
Yes. Yeah, so right now I'm currently at 190 episodes, and I mean it's really hard to pick because there's been some phenomenal women on, but most recently I had Lee Baird. She's the VP of Mighty Hook, and she was talking about being in a leadership position and how to balance that out with motherhood because she's a mom. And then I had Parisa Kiani. She's from Phillips Corporation. She actually switched careers later on in life, so she was in a different industry before she came into engineering and manufacturing, and she's part of their sales team. So she was talking about, some of the transferable skills that she brought from her previous industry into engineering and manufacturing, and some of the challenges that she had to overcome because she wasn't familiar with a lot of the jargon and the technical stuff that happens in our industry. Faye Goldstein was recently on. She's the co-founder of Folio, and that's a platform that's really transforming manufacturing sales. So she was talking about the AI component that they're using to really customize some of the materials that salespeople will use to bring in leads and convert them to to customers. A long time ago, I had Dolly Marshall on. She's an actual Rosie the Riveter. At the time, she was 92, 93. So she was just talking about some of the stuff that she was doing during World War II, and just kind of, the responsibility that they didn't realize that they had at that time. Cause she was like, we didn't realize the doors that it was going to open for women after us. And then I talked to Yvonne Fasshold, who's Rose Bud. So she's a daughter of one of Rosie the Riveters. And they just talked about the Rosie the Riveter Association and some of the things that they're doing to really get news out there about opportunities within this sector that women can pursue. So it was really fun because it kind of turned into this really emotional story because they represented like over 40% of manufacturing during that time, and the impact that they had was huge, and it really did open up doors for a lot of us. And then I have had some gentlemen on, one which is Chris Granger. So he is actually the podcast host of EECO, and he came on and he was talking about some of the things that he did at home with his daughters to really get them excited about STEM opportunities. So he was talking about STEM play and things that other dads can do to really encourage their daughters to pursue things like science, math, and engineering. So there's a bunch of others. Danielle Boyer, she's the founder of the STEAM Connection. She created a 3D printed robot that teaches other cultures about indigenous language, which is really cool. Cara Branch has been on. She's the founder of Black Girls Do Engineer organization. Kathy Miller and Shannon Carrells, they're the authors of Steel Toes and Stilettos. Kathy Rini and her daughter from Flexline Automation came on, and they were talking about being a woman-owned business and what it's like to be in business with a mother-daughter duo in a family-run business. Kristen Carlson was on. She's the president of Peerless Precision, and the components that they make were actually in the cameras that caught the Boston bomber a few years back. So a lot of different conversations, a lot of different perspectives of engineering and manufacturing. I had Barbie the welder on, and she talked about her journey into becoming a welding artist. I also had Ray, who's another welding artist. So just so many things happening in this industry that you can do things with making your hands. So yeah, I suggest people go check it out. There's a lot of different pathways you can take. And if you don't like the pathway you're currently on, you can definitely pivot and try something else out, especially now because there's so many opportunities available out there.
Right. And then with so many guests that you've had on the podcast, is there like a specific section of manufacturing or like sector that would you consider like your favorite?
That's really hard. So I really like additive manufacturing because when I first started writing about that space, there were a lot of people that were like, this is not going to last. This is just like a hobbyist type industry. But then, more and more companies came out because initially you couldn't print metal. And then when they started printing metal, you couldn't print certain types of metal. So copper was like a huge one that you couldn't print. So just to see how that industry has really advanced, and now some of the other industries, so like the submarine industry is really interested in how they can use additive manufacturing to really build some of their components on the submarines. That's really fascinating. I think CNC machining is great just because of how far that industry has come, and some of the metal pieces that are coming out now are just phenomenal. Like I can't believe the capabilities of some of these machines and CNC machining. So, and definitely robotics, like who doesn't like robots? Like I love robots. I think there's different things coming out with automation that are going to make our lives easier. So I really like the conversations around the automation space. But I think additive manufacturing has been my favorite so far, just because initially it was like, no, this is going to die out. No one's actually going to use this. And I'm always a fan of underdogs. So it's great to see that industry progress forward.
Right. And then talking about the underdog and talking about how you're spotlighting women in the industry, what would you say that the manufacturing industry is doing to attract more women to the workforce or to expand?
Yeah, so I think slowly but surely we're doing different things. So initially, flex hours was not part of the conversation, but there are companies that are offering flex hours. So if there are parents within the industry, you're able to take certain times to, so if your like kid gets sick, you can be able to leave work, pick them up, then come back to work. There's a couple companies that I talked to, and they actually started daycares within their facilities. They're offering breastfeeding pods, which is amazing. And then also, another thing that companies are really focusing on is career development. So when a woman is hired within their business, they actually sit them down, and it's not just with the women either, it's with all of their employees, but they sit down and they talk about, okay, what do you want your career to look like? Where do you want to be within a year, 3 years from now, 5 years from now? And then they do their performance evals based off of that conversation. So if in a year's time, if they decide to change their mind, then they can pivot and maybe pick another pathway for them to be successful within that company. And it really helps them develop the leadership skills, the skill sets that they need. And they know that there's a chance for them to keep moving up the ladder instead of staying stagnant. So it's really good to have those types of conversations. And then I know quite a few businesses too that are like going to 4-day work weeks instead of 5, which is amazing for parents, I think. And then I think just showcasing women in different roles is helpful, because if you can't see it, you really can't be it. And it's really helpful for younger generations or current generations to actually see women thriving in those higher level positions. Because right now, at the mid level management level, we're only 1 in 4 at that level. And then at the executive level, the latest stat that I saw was at 12%. So we only represent 12% of the C-suite executive level.
Right. And then if I can get your opinion on something, because when I was growing up and when I was getting ready to go into college, I know that manufacturing wasn't necessarily something that was advertised.
Yeah.
Um, or focused heavily on. But what would you say that schools and institutions can do differently to make that like a more standout option?
Yeah, so I think schools need to partner with manufacturers, especially the local manufacturing companies within their community, and they need to expose younger generations earlier. So initially the plan was, because I remember we started having the career conversations around 7th, 8th grade, and then some wait until high school. And I don't know, I feel like that's kind of too late. And I'm not saying, okay, at elementary school, you should sit kids down and, talk about their career goals, because they're not, I don't think they're really going to know what that means or cares about it. But there is a school within my community starting at kindergarten. They talk to the kids about what they're passionate about and what their interests are, and they try to align their curriculum based on that. And every year they do that same conversation to see if anything has changed or where they're really thriving in some of their skill sets. And then they apply the curriculum to keep their attention. Because I think people learn at different rates. And depending on what the topic is, they're not everybody's going to be interested in the same thing. So if you force them in a class that they don't want to be in, they're going to lose attention right away. And then it becomes a problem, right, for the learning environment. So I think there's ways that you can expose some of these concepts and processes at earlier ages. So there's a company called Batesville Products. And one of their employees actually helped write a children's book, and they're in the foundry industry. And what she did is she went to the elementary schools and she taught them how to melt down chocolate and make chocolate molds. So it's not necessarily like giving them the exact process of melting down metal, but it's teaching them those basic steps of what the foundry industry is all about. So I think there's creative ways that you can bring engineering and manufacturing to younger generations, make it really exciting, and then tap into what their passions are, what their big dreams are, and then create a conversation around that so that they know, oh, if I pursue this career pathway, my dreams can come true and I can become what I want to become. So I think
Right.
there's different things that we can do. But yeah, they definitely need to have those conversations. For me, when I was in high school, because I tested so well in English, that like determined the pathway I was supposed to be on. And my counselor at the time was like, "Oh, you can be a teacher, or you can be a marketer." And I'm like, that doesn't sound interesting at all. So I think counselors as well need to have these conversations with whatever businesses they're trying to get kids into. They need to have conversations so that they know how to talk about it as well too, because what we're finding is you don't necessarily need a specific skill set to be really successful in this industry. You can have different skill sets and still apply them in this industry in a different way. So like women tend to be more creative than men, and engineering and manufacturing really didn't start pitching that creative side until I want to say few years ago. It can be a very creative avenue for designers and people that are interested in drawings and all that other stuff. So we have to figure out, okay, yes, you have this sort of skill set, but can that be transferable into engineering and manufacturing?
This episode of the SNEED-CAST is brought to you by the SNEED-JET Titan Tabletop Printer. The Titan is perfect for businesses making the leap from manual to semi-automated coding, with its horizontal traversing printhead capable of producing crisp, high-quality prints up to 12.7 millimeters in height. With an intuitive design, simply load your ink cartridge, create or upload your message, position your product, and activate the motor. Porting both solvent and water-based inks in a variety of colors like black, white, red, blue, and even UV, the SNEED-JET Titan accommodates a wide range of surfaces from aluminum cans and plastic bottle caps to food packaging and ceramic items. Upgrade your coding operations today with the versatile and reliable SNEED-JET Titan Tabletop Printer.
Right. Yeah, no, now that you touch on that, I know that whenever I was going into college, deciding on careers, I started in design, and then I was minoring in advertising at the time, and that got me into what is now been my copywriting career. And I never once thought that I would end up copywriting for a manufacturing company. So it's
Yeah.
interesting to see where that could potentially lead you.
Well,
But
I went to a high school
right.
and I met I want to say she was a junior, but she was in one of the CNC machining classes, and her teacher actually pulled her into the class. And I was like, "Well, what are you planning on doing when you graduate from high school?" And she's like, "I want to be a tattoo artist." I was like, "You should look into CAD classes." And she goes, "Why would I want to do that?" And I'm like, "Because you could design better tattoos with some sort of CAD program." And she's like, "I never even thought of that way." And I was like, "Yeah, you should look into it." And I said, "And then if tattoo doesn't work out for you, you at least have that skill set and you can apply it to something in engineering or manufacturing." And she thought that was the coolest thing ever.
Yeah, no, that's eye-opening for sure. What would you say are some of the challenges that women face within the industry?
Um, that's such a hard question sometimes for me to answer, because I think I think there's certain things that are happening right now that make it a little bit difficult, but I know there's some companies out there that have that traditional view still of, we're going to say certain things and talk about certain things that can make it uncomfortable for people to be around. So I think that old company culture is still out there and that needs to be changed. But I also think, you know, because there's such right now we're representing 30% of manufacturing and engineering, and that's kind of misleading because it really doesn't specify where we're represented as. So a lot of women end up in sales and marketing, but then when you go down to the specific fields, the percentages become less. So like I think CNC machining is like 11 or 12% women. At welding, I can't remember the statistic, but because there isn't a lot of representation at the higher level, I think it's hard for some women to see themselves climbing that ladder and being a C-suite type role. So, oh, I can't own a company because there's not a lot of people here. And so there are some communities that are doing a better job. I have talked to some women when they were taking their engineering classes, they were like one of just the only one, or they were one of four or one of six. And they felt a little intimidated to ask questions because they didn't want to be the person to ask the dumb question, because then they didn't want that to create a negative stereotype for being, oh, well, the girls just ask kind of the dumb question. So I think the amount of women that are trying to go through some of these courses and not having enough people to connect to, I think that's a challenge to overcome, because you really have to have that motivation factor. Like, no, I'm just going to do this anyways because this is what I like to do. And sometimes they call it imposter syndrome, and I hate that term because it's not really a syndrome, but sometimes if you don't have that confidence, you're not going to continue on that pathway. So I think that and mentorship can be a challenge. So if you don't have someone there supporting you and guiding you along your pathway, some women will just think that this is not the space for them. So I think what companies can actually do is, whether they are recruiting someone out of the college or technical school level, or it's someone within their own company, I think they can develop some sort of mentorship program, and again, sit them down and talk about, okay, where do you want your career to end up? Where do you see yourself in 3 years? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? So I think it's really just that lack of representation that might be one of the biggest challenges, and then company culture. So if you have a poor company culture that doesn't really support a diverse workforce, it can be really hard to either stay at that company or move your way up the ladder. So I think there's things that companies can do to be more supportive in those areas.
Right. And then going back to a point that you had made earlier where you had said that women bring more creativity, what would you say are some other unique skill sets that women bring into the industry?
So I definitely think we have the emotional intelligence factor down packed. I don't know why. Maybe it's just the way our brain chemistries are, but I think we are natural connectors. So, like, building strong relationships and bringing people together to work as a team, I think is a big one that I've seen across the conversations that I've had on Mavens of Manufacturing. A lot of the women that I know are great at multitasking and adapting to when things change on the fly. Um, they just don't, they're like, okay, this happened, so let's figure it out and move forward. And I think that's really phenomenal, because there's a lot of things that can happen within this industry. Creativity with innovation, I think, is another one, and then attention to detail. So I was talking to some men welders, and they were talking about some of the women welders that they had on their team, and they were like, they're just better at the welds. And it's because they're like, we don't know if it's just because they have better balance or they have more petite hands or whatever, but their attention to detail on the welds is just phenomenal. So they've seen a lot of good women welders within that space.
Right. And then what's some advice that you would give to women that are interested in starting a career in manufacturing?
I think they should definitely go for it, because there's so many opportunities within this space that you can have such a fulfilling and successful career. And I know that there's some women that have had negative experiences within this sector, but they've stuck through it and they have been able to build a lot of meaningful relationships and create successful careers for themselves. You're never going to get bored. There's always something going on, because technology is advancing so fast. Like, you're going to see a lot of cool things come out that are going to help us just live better lives in the future. Like, maybe I'm dating myself here by mentioning this movie, but one of my favorite movies that I watched growing up was Back to the Future. And I remember the self-lacing Nike shoes, the hover skateboard, and the flying cars. Like, we're not far off from a lot of that stuff that happened in the movies. And I think it's just fascinating because, a lot of us forget that we are on an island. Like, Earth is a small dot in the vast space that we are part of. And we are creating technology and designing things that are going to eventually help us go beyond that. And that's really stinking cool. Like, I think it's really cool that we are going to probably see somebody land on Mars soon, maybe. Fingers crossed, that would be awesome. But we're already landing on Mars. Like we have rovers and stuff up there already. And it's just really cool to see groups of people coming together, designing cool technology, and the pride that's on their faces after something is even with failures. Like it's just really interesting to see how people come together in this space to create really cool technologies. And when failures do happen, I've seen people come together and help each other out so that they can continue to rise up. And even outside of that, there's a gentleman that I know, his son has cancer, and he posted something about it on social media. And so many people from this sector came together to donate to that cause. And it's just fascinating to see that camaraderie and the humanness come into play.
Right. And then if you could give advice to manufacturing companies that are looking to recruit more women into their workforce, what advice would you give?
I would suggest that they go to the high schools and actually pick on the girls, because there are some that will stand in the back and not use their voices. So actually call them out. I think another uh, essential place to look into is any kind of like robotics team or Skills USA type of team. You really need to be purposeful in your recruitment. So go out there, have conversations. If they're not raising their hand, call on them anyways. For women who are in this space or coming into the space, take them under your wing and, mentor them. Talk about the business, talk about resources that they can look into, to really expand their knowledge within the space. Join organizations like WIM. So Women in Manufacturing is a huge organization. They not only have national chapters, but they also have international chapters. They have international events. They had an event in Spain, I think one in the UK. Like they're continuing to grow as well too. And the resources that they have for not just women, but also men, and how to collaboratively work together and be better teammates it's been helpful for me as a member of that organization. So any business that is thinking about, okay, where can we invest our budget this year, think about investing in a school or a team or an organization like WIM, so that you are grabbing their attention, keeping them curious, and supporting them along that pathway.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Megan, for all of the information. I couldn't agree with you. I feel like the industry definitely needs more exposure, especially when it comes to bringing more women onto the team. But we also want to give you the chance to plug any social channels, your podcast, and just leave us with any pieces of advice.
Yeah, so the quickest way to contact me is on LinkedIn. I'm on there a lot of the time, probably more than I should be. And then if you want to go to YouTube, just look up Mavens of Manufacturing and subscribe there. I have a lot of cool women talking about some amazing things there. And, I do want to shout out to another podcast, Automation Ladies. That's Nikki Gonzalez and Ali G. They're doing, and Courtney Fernandez, I forgot she just joined their team, but they're doing some amazing things as well to really inspire younger girls to get involved. And if you're asking, okay, well, does it really make a difference? There's two little girls. They have the hashtag Junior Board of Directors. They watch all of Mavens of Manufacturing episodes and all of Automation Ladies episodes, and they have constant conversations with their dad about, hey, can we try this out? Can we do this? And we have pictures of them doing welding and working on PLC stuff. And they're really curious about this industry. And hopefully when they get past high school, we recruited 2 more engineers or manufacturers from them. But it does make a difference. So just go out there and share your story, showcase the cool technologies that you're doing, open up your doors, bring people into your facilities, give them a tour, and make a great event about it. Also, too, another big piece of advice I would say, don't just focus on the schools and the kids in the schools, also focus on other community leaders. So anybody that owns a smaller business, anyone that owns a bank, look into your hospitals, and also focus on the parents as well too, because right now, as you mentioned, with the awareness problem, we need to be all hands on deck and really generate that education for the general public so that they can understand that we got a lot of cool things going on, and without manufacturing, our economic stability and even our national security is at risk.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Megan, for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.